It takes an unbelievable amount of force to flip a 20-ton plane full of fuel and people upside down.
Drop it!
No. Holy.
Delta Airlines Flight 4819 crash-landed Monday afternoon at Toronto's Pearson International Airport. 80 people on board.
We just landed. Our plane crashed. It's upside down.
I was just in a plane crash. Oh my God.
The hard question is, why did this happen? But the easier question is, how did this happen? I'll try to answer both, but let's start with the how, because we can see how.
Oh. Oh, no.
It's hard to imagine how a plane can completely roll over when its entire design is intended to keep it stable and upright. The wings generate lift, but importantly, equal lift on both sides. And the weight distribution on a plane is very carefully considered to help preserve this balance. Where you put the luggage, where you put the fuel, where you put the passengers. But what happens when one of those wings snaps off? We can see from photos of the crash, at least one wing has been sheared right off. And we can see from this vantage point how that right wing was driven hard into the ground as the plane began tilting. The fire? That's likely from the fuel.
The wings sever right away upon impact. Imagine the wings with all the fuel tanks in there. If it's still intact after the impact, it could have turned into a fireball.
For that reason, that separation might have been the best possible thing that could have happened at that moment. And that's by design, because it keeps the cabin, where all the people are, from itself catching fire or even ripping apart entirely. But if you lose one wing, the other takes over, and that's not good.
That the right wing is missing. It's not attached to the airplane. That means that the left wing is still producing lift.
Consider a plane making a routine landing. Two wings intact. Plane stays upright. But when that same plane, for whatever reason, tilts violently to one side, enough for one wing to make contact with the ground and separate entirely, that other wing is still flying. As you just heard, it's generating lift, and it's throwing the whole plane out of whack.
We skidded like on our side and then flipped over on our back. There was like a big fireball out this left side of the plane. And when we got finished, it was I was upside down. Everybody else was there as well.
We can see the plane, in this case, rolling towards the wing that makes contact with the ground. And take a look at this moment where the plane is 90 degrees on its side. Imagine if there's any kind of crosswind at all on that wing, it would be exerting a force in the same direction the body of the plane is already rotating. That wing then crashes into the ground on the other side of the plane, and within an instant,
1 or 2 seconds and the airplane's upside down.
Oh my God.
Now, the harder question, and what investigators will be trying to figure out, is why the plane tipped to one side to begin with. Until the crash, everything about Flight 4819 seemed perfectly normal. An almost daily flight from Minneapolis to Toronto. It's a pretty straight shot, and on the approach, the plane makes one last turn to come in from the northeast.
Toronto Tower, Endeavour 4819, I'm talking, 23.
That's the pilot of the plane approaching runway 23 at Toronto's airport. Air traffic control sees him coming and gives a warning.
Endeavour 4819, Toronto Tower, wind 270, 23, gust 33, clear to line on rate 23. You might get a slight bump in the glide path. There'll be an aircraft in front of it.
Now, I'll say right now, it's always hard to know exactly what these guys are saying because they speak so fast and it's almost like another language. And I'm not actually 100% sure if air traffic control is warning of a side bump or a slight bump, but warning the pilot of a side bump on the glide path could very well be referring to a crosswind on the plane's descent.
We can see strong wind. Wind is gusting up to 35 knots. So that's fairly strong wind in aviation terms.
From Environment Canada, we know that winds were gusting at this time at around 65 kilometers an hour. That sounds like a lot, but was it enough to flip the plane? Experts say the wind direction and speed were actually within the landing tolerance of this specific plane.
The wind was not precisely aligned with the runway, but it was within normal limits. So, and this is something professional pilots deal with a lot, is crosswinds.
And the airport's fire chief told reporters pretty clearly.
What we can say is the runway was dry and there was no crosswind conditions.
But here's the thing, even though this is coming from an official source, I don't fully understand on what basis they've so quickly ruled out crosswinds as a factor, because there were crosswinds at the time. And there are a couple of accounts from experts who believe the pilot, just before the crash, may have been executing what's called a crab maneuver to compensate for the wind, as evidenced by the aircraft banking to the right.
The crab maneuver is generally used when there's strong crosswinds. The crosswind is wind coming from the left or coming from the right, rather than straight down the runway.
You can see what crabbing a plane looks like in this video posted on YouTube by SDTV Live. They're an aviation education channel. You're basically turning into the wind, trying to hold course, so you're not getting blown off your flight path. As you can see, it almost looks like flying sideways, the way a crab walks. But when you land, you have to turn sharply back in line with the runway. And depending on the size of the plane you're flying, sometimes you might even touch down while tilted, so that one wheel touches the ground before the other. Now, it's impossible for us to know if this was why the plane's right wing drove into the ground, because there are still other potential reasons things could have gone wrong.
From what the passengers have said, the airplane hit very firmly.
There is a world where if wind is jostling the plane enough and the plane hits the ground hard enough, that might cause the kind of crash we saw.
It could have played a role if it hit hard enough to have the main gear force the wing to break, then the departure of the wing causes it to go upside down.
And we know from how plane rollovers work, if you lose one wing, the stability of the entire plane can be catastrophically compromised.
4543 ground runway 24 right, data Golf altimeter 2993. Stand by.
We need crash fire rescue on the runway. We need emergency services, runway 23.
Yeah, we're on it. We got the call going out.
As with all such investigations, whatever information is on the plane's black box will be crucial in piecing together what happened in those final moments before the crash. But what everyone we spoke to seems to agree on is how impressive the response to the crash was.
They got 80 people out of that airplane in a very short period of time. The flight attendants did a great job. They got those exits open and they got people out of the airplane and moving away from it.
Air traffic control, fire crews, even medevac flights in transit that diverted towards the crash in a pinch the moment the plane went down. All of them had to make split-second decisions. And while just over 20 people were hurt in this crash, everyone survived.